Hello, and welcome to a new episode of the Treasury of Constantinople. This week, we'll talk about one of the most beloved, studied, and researched series of coins, the FEL TEMP REPARATIO. Before we get into it, though, let's set the scene. When Constantine the Great died in 337, his sons Constantine II, Constantius II, and Constans became co-emperors. Constantine II got Gaul, Hispania, and Britain. Constans got Italy, Illyricum, and Africa, and Constantius II received Greece, Thrace, the Asian provinces, and Egypt. Then, in 340, Constantine II died, and Constans got his provinces. So, after 340, we have essentially Constans in the west and Constantius in the east. Around this time, the empire was having another serious issue with inflation, and so, in 348, Constantius II and his younger brother Constans carry out a monetary reform of the bronze coinage, replacing Constantine the Great's follis with new denominations. A distinguishing feature of the coins that came out of this reform is that all of them bear the legend FEL TEMP REPARATIO, short for Felicitas Temporum Reparatio, and meaning restoration of happy times, or happy days are here again. There are 5 major reverse types that bear this FTR legend: the falling horseman, the galley, the barbarian and the hut, the emperor and 2 captives, and the phoenix. These coins were minted by Constantius II and Constans, as you'd expect, as well as by the Caesars Constantius Gallus and Julian. Later, the usurpers Magnentius and Procopius will also mint coins with FEL TEMP REPARATIO reverses. So this coinage reform introduced 4 new denominations: the heavy myarina, the light myarina, the half myarina, and the quarter myarina. None of these lasted very long, and only the quarter myarina, that originally weighed 2.5 grams and then became the reduced myarina in 357, weighing only 1.9 grams, lasted more than 10 years. It too was discontinued around 363, and replaced by the centennialis and half centennialis. It's important to note that the name myarina is a modern invention. Like many other Roman and Byzantine coins, there are no records of what people at the time actually called their own coins. Myarina, short for pecunia, myarina just means large coin. Online, you'll find FTR coins being sold with the names follis, myarina, half myarina, centennialis, and half centennialis. Considering all these names are made up, don't worry too much about them. Focus on this instead. When talking about the Constantinian bronze coins, numismats and collectors usually use a size scale AE1 to AE4. It's entirely based on the actual size of the coin, so it's much more reliable. AE1 is for coins over 25 millimeters in diameter, AE2 for coins between 21 and 25 millimeters, AE3 between 17 and 21 millimeters, and AE4 for smaller coins, under 17 millimeters. You can also say, for example, AE13 for a coin that measures 13 millimeters, or AE22 if it measures 22 millimeters, and so on. So if we use this scale, right after the reform, the falling horseman and the galley types were large AE2 types, while the barbarian and the hut and the emperor and 2 captives were small AE2. The phoenix and a small version of the galley were AE3. Over time, though, these coins decreased in size, especially the falling horseman, which continued being minted until 354. It went from a large AE2 to a small AE2 to AE3, and all the way down to AE4 in the later years. Having said that, let's now look closely at the designs of each of the reverse types. The falling horseman is by far the most popular type of the series. It depicts a Roman soldier spearing a fallen horseman on the ground. This was one of the original large AE2 types, together with the galley. It was minted with the names of Constantius II and Constantius Gallus in 15 mints, Julian II, just Julian at the time, in 13 mints, Constans in 10 mints, and Magnentius only in arelite. If you're wondering why Antioch, for example, would mint coins in the name of Constans, even though it's clearly part of his brother's territory, or the opposite, like Rome or Lugdunum minting coins with Constantius II's portrait, well, that's just how it was. even during the time of Constantine the Great, the same mint would make coins for both Constantine and Licinius, regardless of where it was, because they were co-emperors, and we're talking about a single empire. Having said that, mints tended to issue more coins for the brother that controlled that region. Anyway, the falling horseman was Constantius II's favorite type. Over the years, its size was reduced to AE3, with the final issues being as small as 16 millimeters. In a similar vein, its original 3% silver content was reduced to almost nothing. Now, there are a lot of interpretations for the design of this coin, as well as for each of the FTR reverse types, but there are two major trends. One is that the iconography of the FTR series is related to the legend Restoration of Happy Times, in a general sense by depicting scenes that instill a sense that the emperors were restoring said happy times, while the other line of thought is that each of the types represents a very specific event, and that by depicting these events, the coins reminded people how the emperors were restoring the happy times. The happy times mentioned are universally accepted to be the good old golden ages of the Roman past, when the empire was strong and peaceful, as opposed to the mess of civil wars and foreign attacks that Rome suffered in the 3rd century. So, for our falling horsemen, if you subscribe to the first theory, then the picture clearly shows how the Roman emperors are defeating the enemy barbarians, securing the borders, and all that good stuff. By looking at coins from different mints, you notice that not only the poor barbarian appears in different positions, kneeling, sitting, reaching, clutching, but you'll also see how he is wearing different clothes. His hair and beard is different and so on, indicating they portray barbarians of different tribes. But if you subscribe to the second theory, then what different clothes and hairstyle? The barbarian very clearly always has a pointy beard and a Phrygian hat, so it's a Persian barbarian. The falling horseman type therefore portrays a battle that took place in 344 AD, where the Sassanid crown prince was captured by the Romans. Next up is the galley. It was also one of the original large AE2 types, and Constans' favorite, being much more commonly issued in the Western mints. It shows the emperor standing on a galley steered by Victory. The emperor is holding either a small figure of Victory or a phoenix on a globe. It was minted in the name of Constans in 13 mints, Constantius II in 8 mints, Constantius Gallus in 3 mints, and Magnentius only in Treveri. Its size also went down from AE2 to AE3, but never got as small as the falling horseman type, as it was discontinued after only 2 or 3 years. It does show some variations in design, though again, not nearly as many as the falling horsemen. As for the interpretation of the picture, some say it shows Constans' crossing of the English Channel in the winter of 342. Others say that there's absolutely nothing in the design of the ship that links it to that event, and that therefore it must be seen as a symbol of a successful government being steered by a wise emperor into a better future. An interesting point to note here is the labarum that the emperor is holding. This is the only Christian symbol in the whole FTR series. Around that time, a large part of the population was still pagan, and one might think that putting a religious symbol of a religion that just a few years earlier had been horrifically persecuted, one that was still far from being the religion of the majority of the people, would be a risky move. However, it's very likely that us seeing the labarum as a Christian symbol doesn't mean that the people of the time did. Some numismats have reached the conclusion that the labarum was in fact acceptable to both to pagans and Christians, because to the people of the time it was a symbol of Constantine the Great, a Constantinian symbol of victory, so by putting it on the coinage, Constantius II and Constans were stressing their legitimate claim to emperorship, rather than making a religious statement. The galley reverse type was discontinued after Constans' death in 350. A similar design with a different legend was later revived during the era of Theodosius. The Barbarian and the hut is a middle denomination, usually called small AE2, being only slightly smaller than the falling horseman and the galley and containing less silver. It was minted only by Constans and Constantius II, Constans in 13 mints, Constantius in 11. The reverse shows a soldier leading, or dragging, depending on how you want to look at it, a small barbarian from a hut that's under a tree. Numismats have had a real hard time interpreting this one. Most see it as a peaceful scene, though. Something along the lines of a soldier leading a barbarian, different barbarians from different tribes if you pay attention to their hairstyle and coins from different mints. from his primitive dwellings to be settled in the Roman world, or the more general notion of the submission of the barbarian world to the might of the Roman Empire by civilizing and Romanizing the barbarians. This was actually something that Constans was responsible for, so those that want to link it to a specific event suggest the peaceful settlement of the Franks in Toxandria, led by Constans in 341–342 AD. Some are not so kind, and point out that in some coins the little barbarian seems to be bound at the elbows, thus making this type similar to the emperor and two captives that we'll have a look at next. Others go further into the opposite direction, asserting that not only the little barbarian isn't being dragged, it's not a little barbarian at all, but a Roman farmer being led to safety by the emperor who protects him from the barbarian threat. A random but interesting variation in this type is the trees. It seems like each mint chose to use a different tree. Note that this type was more often minted in the West, though Constantius II versions also exist. It was discontinued after the death of Constans in 350 AD, so the variation in sizes is limited, and the variation of designs, aside from the obvious difference of the trees and the not-so-obvious difference of the barbarians, is small. The emperor and the two captives is a small AE2 type just like the barbarian and the hut, but was more common in the East. It was minted by Constantius II in 8 mints and Constans in only 3. This type shows the emperor standing holding a labarum in his right hand and a shield in his left hand. At his feet, there are 2 captives kneeling. This type complements well Constantius II's other favorite reverse type, the falling horseman, the latter showing the emperor as a soldier in the act of victory, the former showing the emperor after battle with captives at his feet. If looking for a specific event to link this one to, then the transplantation of the inhabitants of Adiabene to Thrace in 343 would be a good choice. Of the whole FTR series, the emperor and the 2 captives is the type with the least amount of variation in the design. The most notable difference is probably the position of the captives, while they are usually depicted kneeling. Sometimes it looks like they're almost standing. The phoenix is the smallest denomination of the FTR series, AE4, weighing around 2.5 grams and with diameters under 17 millimeters, sometimes as low as 14 millimeters. They are also fully bronze coins, with only a trace amount of silver. The phoenix type was issued by 13 mints in the name of Constantius II, 11 in Constans's name, and only 2 in Constantius Gallus's name. This reverse type was discontinued very early on, but it has 2 major varieties. One is a radiate phoenix standing on a globe. The other is a nimbite phoenix standing on a pyre, a pile of rocks. The theories surrounding the intended meaning of this coin go a little wild. So, first, the phoenix is a symbol of rebirth, eternity, and a golden age, and as such it can be seen as particularly appropriate for a series of coins issued around the 1100th anniversary of the founding of Rome. However, there's more to it. There was a well-known prophecy at the time about the demise of Rome. It told that Romulus had seen 12 vultures before founding Rome, with each vulture representing 1 century. It meant that after 12 centuries, the Roman Empire would come to an end. Since 348 AD marked the beginning of this final century, it's been suggested that the phoenix, together with the legend FEL TEMP REPARATIO, are an attempt to reassure the people that the finite cycle of Romulan centuries was going to be replaced by limitless and self-perpetuating happy times. In other words, that Rome wouldn't fall, but would instead live on as a peaceful and happy empire forever. Another way of looking at it, using the interpretation of the phoenix as an element of eternity, is that the phoenix represented the eternity of both the empire and the emperor himself. This, together with the idea that the phoenix also represented a golden age, and in particular the restoration of a golden age, can be seen as an allusion to the fact that Constantius II and Constans were the custodians of their father's legacy, Constantine the Great, whose reign saw the actual restoration of happy times. A last interpretation of the meaning of the phoenix coin type is its association with the sun. By late antiquity, the army was the largest beneficiary of tax money, and the stipendia they received was most likely in bronze coins. Needless to say, long gone were the days of being paid in salt. Thus, soldiers would be among the first to handle the new coinage. With the solar cult being so popular among the army, it's not far-fetched to imagine that the decision to feature an animal with solar connotations, together with the legend restoration of happy times, was a deliberate attempt of the emperor to remain in the army's good graces. After all, the loyalty of the army was a conditio sine qua non for a successful and long-lived reign. Besides these 5 main reverse types, there are a further 4 that bear the same legend. Those are the emperor and 1 captive, the standing emperor, the emperor riding a horse, and the large M. Let's have a look at each of them. Don't get comfy, it's pretty short. The emperor and 1 captive type was minted only in Thessalonica by Constantius II and Constantius Gallus. The reverse is somewhat similar to the emperor and 2 captives type. It shows the emperor standing, holding a labarum on his left hand, and victory on a globe with the right hand. There's 1 captive seated at his feet. This is a relatively big AE2 issue. The standing emperor reverse type was only minted by Magnentius, and only in the Lugdunum mint. Its size is AE2 as well, and the reverse depicts the emperor standing holding a labarum. Next, we have the emperor riding a horse. It was a special issue of the mint in Rome, only minted under the names of Constantius II and Constans. This reverse is very rare, and unfortunately that's the only picture I could find. Because the quality isn't that good, here is a picture of an extremely similar type. This one is from Magnentius and has the legend Gloria Romanorum. So, the reverse of our emperor riding a horse FTR coin depicts the emperor riding a horse, aiming a spear and holding a shield. There are 2 barbarians on the floor to the right. It's also an AE2 coin like the previous 2. The last special type is really truly rare. I genuinely couldn't find any pictures of it online, so I made one. The large M type is one of the last types, minted around 355 to 357, only by Constantius II and only in Rome. The reverse has a large M with 3 dots. It's the smallest of the special types, AE3. And before we end, let's go over the obverses. As a quick recap, the FTR series was minted with the names of emperors Constantius II and Constans, the Caesars Constantius Gallus and Julian, and the usurpers Magnentius and Procopius. The portraits of Constantius II and his brother Constans are often very similar, so the easiest way to distinguish them would be to read the legends. Constantius II's coins will always say Constantius, while Constance's will always say Constans. Constantius Gallus might seem like a problem at first, since he has the same name as his cousin Constantius II, and in fact both their coins actually say Constantius, but it's easy to tell them apart because Constantius Gallus always has a bear head, while Constantius II is always depicted wearing a diadem. The legends can also help a bit. Constantius Gallus was a Caesar, so his coins usually say NOBC or something similar, while Constantius II, being an emperor, has AVG for Augustus. Note that this is the case for this series of coins, but obviously Constantius, before becoming emperor, was a Caesar too, so his earlier coins do say NOBC, like the Campgate coins and the early Gloria Romanorum coins. In any case, all the children of Constantine the Great were always depicted with diadems on coinage, even as Caesars, which was not the case for the nephews. This leads to the next problem, telling Constantius Gallus's coins apart from Julian II's, at the time just Julian, since he also always shows up bare-headed. This is further complicated by their faces looking very similar in the coins. Yes, Julian II's portrait is very distinctive, and most people can tell a coin is from him a mile away. But that's for the portrait after he becomes emperor. When he's a little Caesar, his baby face is very similar to his brothers, Constantius Gallus, and their cousins, Constantius and Constans. Maybe it's because they really looked alike. Maybe it's because the engravers couldn't bother. Either way, Julian's coins always say Julianus, and if that's not enough, then remember, Julian only has the falling horseman type. Magnentius and Procopius coins are very easy to tell, not only because their faces look very different from the 4 cousins, but also their names are different so you can read the legends. And that's it for this one. If we made any mistakes or missed anything important about this topic, please leave a nicely worded comment below. Have a nice morning, afternoon, or evening, depending on when you're watching this video. And I hope to see you next time. Also, if you like collecting coins, or know someone who does, feel free to check out Adelaide's eBay store, The Spanish Galleon. We're also on Instagram, links in the description.